There's a special kind of silence that exists at the heart of a perfect moment. For me, that moment was my wedding reception. The sprawling vineyard terrace was bathed in the liquid gold of a Napa Valley sunset. Twinkling fairy lights were just beginning to glow in the ancient oak trees, and the air smelled of jasmine and expensive champagne. I stood near the dance floor, my hand resting comfortably in the crook of my father's arm, watching my new wife, Isabella, laugh as she danced with a circle of her friends. She was a vision in her custom-designed lace gown, her dark hair cascading in loose curls. She looked every bit the blissful bride. And in that moment, I, Alexander Alex Croft, aged 52, believed I was the luckiest man alive. The speech from my best man and business partner, Julian, had just ended, a heartfelt, slightly roguish tribute to our 30 years of friendship. The crowd of 200, family, old friends, business associates, was warm and joyful. I felt a profound sense of peace, of a new beginning after the long, lonely years following my first wife's passing. Sarah had been gone for 8 years, and this was the first time I truly felt my heart might be whole again. Isabella, 28, with the energy of a summer storm, had blown into my life 2 years prior. She was a junior curator at a gallery my foundation supported. She was vibrant, intelligent, and made me feel young again. I knew people talked. I saw the glances they exchanged. Gold digger, they whispered. But I dismissed them as cynics. Isabella wasn't like that. She loved me, not my fortune. She'd told me so, often, her eyes brimming with sincerity. The band started playing our song. Isabella floated towards me, her smile radiant. She took my hands. "Ready for our first dance, my handsome husband," she whispered. But before we could step onto the floor, her brother, Marco, a man with the slick charm of a daytime talk show host, clinked his fork loudly against his glass. "Everyone. If I could have your attention." The crowd quieted, turning with expectant smiles. This wasn't on the agenda. Marco put a brotherly arm around Isabella. "I just wanted to say, on this beautiful day, how thrilled our family is to welcome Alex into the fold." He grinned at me, a flash of perfectly white teeth. "And to celebrate, we have a little surprise. A token of our love." He gestured dramatically. 2 of Isabella's cousins rolled out a large, covered object on a dolly. With a flourish, Marco pulled away the cloth to reveal a massive, gaudy, gold-plated statue. It was a bizarre, abstract interpretation of 2 figures, but one was unmistakably me, holding a tiny, stylized version of Isabella. "Isn't it magnificent?" Marco announced. "Solid bronze, 24-karat gold plating. A custom piece, commissioned by Isabella herself, to symbolize your eternal bond and the substantial foundation of your new life together." The crowd's polite applause was tinged with confusion and second-hand embarrassment. The statue was garish, tasteless, a glaring symbol of new money in a room full of old. But what happened next froze the blood in my veins. Isabella beamed, turning to address our guests. "Yes. And I want to dedicate it to my Alex," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "The man who proved that true love isn't just about hearts and flowers. It's about security. It's about knowing your future is taken care of." She looked directly at me, her eyes hardening for a fraction of a second. "And to show everyone here that what's his," she paused, patting my chest, "is now ours." The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a claim. A public, humiliating staking of her claim on my fortune. I saw Julian's face, his smile vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief. I saw the pity in my sister's eyes. My heart didn't break, it turned to ice. Every whispered warning, every niggling doubt I had suppressed for 2 years, roared to the surface in that single, brazen moment. But I did not react. I did not frown, or pull away, or correct her. Instead, I let a slow, gentle smile spread across my face. I leaned in, kissed Isabella softly on the cheek, and whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "A beautiful sentiment, my dear. Truly, memorable." I then took her hand and led her into our first dance, my posture relaxed, my expression one of benign affection. The crowd, reassured by my calm, began to applaud again. They saw a doting husband indulging his young wife's gauche moment. But beneath the surface, the man they knew, the man who built a logistics empire from a single truck, was already calculating his next move. The game was on, and she had just shown me her hand. The facade began to crack before the honeymoon was over. We were in a private villa in Santorini, and Isabella spent more time on the phone with interior designers about redecorating the manor than she did with me. The request started small, then escalated. "Darling, the master bath feels so dated. A gold leaf mosaic would be so much more us. Alex, my love, my brother Marco has this brilliant business idea, he just needs a little startup capital, $1 million should do it." I played my part, the besotted groom. I approved the bathroom. I told Marco we'd discuss his business plan. But I had already set a trap in motion. The week before the wedding, a gnawing suspicion had led me to hire a discreet, ex-military private investigator named Fletcher. His initial report, delivered encrypted to my phone, was waiting for me. It was all there. Isabella and Marco weren't just siblings, they were partners in a long-running con. The gallery where I met her was a front for money laundering, and she was placed there to meet wealthy patrons. There were photos of her, just days before our engagement, meeting with a man the PI identified as her ex-boyfriend, a struggling artist. The caption in their text messages, provided by a source Fletcher had cultivated, was seared into my brain, "Almost there. The old man is wrapped around my finger. Once the prenup is voided or I get a kid out of him, it's early retirement for both of us." The betrayal was a physical blow. It wasn't just the money. It was the calculated, cold-hearted exploitation of my grief, my loneliness. She had pretended to love me, to understand the hole Sarah's passing had left in my soul. She had used my deepest vulnerability as a weapon against me. The trust wasn't just broken, it had been a fiction from the start. I am a man who built his fortune on contracts, logistics, and foreseeing every possible point of failure. My intelligence was my experience in the cutthroat world of business. My unique skill was a paranoid attention to detail that had saved my company countless times. And I had foreseen this. My prenuptial agreement was not a standard document. I had it drafted by the most ruthless, brilliant contract lawyer in the country, a woman named Eleanor Vance who was known as the Black Widow of family law. We had spent months crafting it. On the surface, it was generous, a substantial lump sum that would make any woman wealthy for life. But it was a gilded cage. The clauses were the trap. It was 120 pages of dense, legalistic fortification. And buried within it, like a series of armed warheads, were the landmines. The infidelity clause, any proven infidelity, at any point from the day we met until the potential dissolution of the marriage, would result in the complete forfeiture of all spousal support and the lump sum. The prenup defined infidelity not just physically, but emotionally, a repeated, secretive relationship of a romantic or intimate nature. The good faith clause, any attempt to coerce, manipulate, or defraud me into altering or voiding the agreement, including but not limited to public humiliation, reproductive coercion, or siphoning of assets, would be considered an act of bad faith, triggering a penalty clause that would not only nullify her payout but force her to pay my legal fees. The sunset clause, the lump sum increased annually for the first 10 years of marriage, incentivizing a long-term union. But if the marriage ended before 5 years due to her bad faith, she got nothing but the clothes in her closet. I had the evidence Fletcher gathered, the texts, the photos, the financial records linking her to Marco's schemes. I had my own records of the extravagant, post-nuptial demands. I had it all. The stakes were my fortune, my sanity, and the memory of my late wife, which Isabella had so carelessly trampled. I would not let her turn Sarah's home into a gaudy trophy palace. The symbolic gesture was a small, encrypted hard drive. It lived in my safe, next to my will. It contained the prenup, all the evidence, and a video file of me, calmly and clearly, dictating a full account of the public wedding announcement and my subsequent discoveries. My envelope was ready to be delivered. The confrontation began 6 months into the marriage. Isabella, frustrated that I was dragging my feet on transferring a property title into her name, decided to force the issue. We were in the library of our home. She started beautifully. "Alex, I feel like you don't trust me. If we're truly partners, what's yours should be ours. This prenup, it feels like a shackle. A constant reminder that you think I'm just after your money." When I didn't immediately capitulate, the tears turned to anger. "I'm your wife. I have a right to that money. I've earned it, putting up with your boring friends, your tedious business dinners. I've made you feel young again, and this is how you thank me?" I remained silent, letting her rage fill the room. Finally, she delivered her ultimatum. "I'm not asking any more, Alex. I want the prenup torn up. Or I walk. And I'll take you for every penny you have. I'll tell the courts you're abusive, that you're controlling. You'll be ruined in the media." I looked at her, at the beautiful, venomous stranger in my library. I felt nothing but a cold, clean clarity. I walked to my safe, spun the dial, and retrieved the hard drive. I placed it gently on the mahogany desk between us. "Isabella," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Your lawyer should look at this before you proceed any further. It contains a copy of our prenuptial agreement, with certain key clauses highlighted. And it contains all the evidence my private investigator has gathered on you and Marco over the last 9 months. I'm having a copy delivered to Eleanor Vance, my attorney, in 1 hour. I suggest you find yourself a very, very good lawyer." I didn't slam it down. I didn't shout. I simply placed it, a silent, digital atom bomb on the polished wood. She stared at it, her face a confused mask of fury and dawning fear. She didn't fully understand yet, but she knew the power dynamic had just irrevocably shifted. The real confrontation happened in Eleanor Vance's sterile, intimidating conference room. Isabella was there with her new, slick-haired lawyer. Marco was in the waiting room, looking pale. I sat beside Eleanor, a fortress of calm. Isabella's lawyer began with bluster. "Mr. Croft, this is absurd. We will not be intimidated by these baseless allegations. My client has been a devoted wife. We will be filing a motion to have this punitive prenup thrown out and will be pursuing maximum spousal support, plus half the marital assets." Eleanor didn't even blink. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Page 87, Clause 14b. The good faith clause. Your client's ultimatum, demanding the voiding of the agreement under threat of defamation, was recorded by Mr. Croft. It triggers the penalty. She gets nothing and is liable for his legal fees. Anger. Isabella slammed her hand on the table. "You can't do this. That's not fair. I'm his wife." Manipulation. Her lawyer tried a new tack. "Alex, be reasonable. Isabella loves you. This is a misunderstanding. She's young, she was scared. Let's settle this like adults. We'll drop the demand to void the prenup, just a modest increase in the lump sum." I shook my head slowly. "It's too late for that." Begging. Isabella's bravado finally collapsed. The tears this time were real, born of sheer panic. "Alex, please. I'm sorry. It was Marco's idea. He pressured me. I do love you, I do. Please, don't do this to me. I'll have nothing." I looked at the woman who had defiled the memory of my marriage to Sarah, who had seen me not as a person but as a piggy bank to be smashed open. I felt a sliver of pity, which I immediately extinguished. "You've had everything you were ever going to get from me, Isabella," I said, my voice flat. "You had a home, security, and for a time, my genuine affection. You chose to betray that. The man you were texting before our wedding?" My investigator had a very enlightening chat with him. He was quite cooperative once he realized the fraud he was implicated in. "He's provided a full, signed affidavit about your plan to baby-trap me after the wedding if the prenup wasn't voided quickly enough." The color drained completely from her face. It was the final, killing blow. I had not only been ahead of her, I had already flanked her and dismantled her entire operation without her even knowing. "You played a dangerous game, Isabella," Eleanor said, closing her folder with a definitive snap. "And you lost. If you proceed to court, we will release all of this evidence. You will not receive a single cent. You will, in fact, be in significant debt to my client. My advice is to sign the divorce papers we've prepared, which enforce the prenup's penalty clauses, and walk away. It's the best, and only, offer you will receive." The fallout was swift. My family and friends, who had held their tongues, now rallied around me. My sister hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Alex. But I'm so proud of you for being smart." The most emotional moment came with Julian. Over a glass of whiskey in my library, the room where it had all begun to unravel, he looked at me, his eyes full of emotion. "I wanted to warn you, Alex. So badly. But you seemed so happy. I didn't want to be the one to break that." "I know," I said, the weight of it all finally settling on me. "And I wouldn't have listened. I had to see it for myself. I stayed silent and played the fool because I needed the proof to be undeniable. Not for a judge, but for me. I needed to be absolutely sure the man I thought I was, a good judge of character, wasn't just a lonely old fool." "You were never a fool, Alex," Julian said firmly. "You were a man who loved his wife and missed her. You were targeted by a professional. This wasn't a failure of your judgment, it was a testament to their skill." Isabella and Marco tried one last, desperate justification in the media, giving a tearful interview to a tabloid show about a ruthless billionaire who lured a young woman and abandoned her. But their story was full of holes, and my legal team, anticipating the move, released a heavily redacted but damning statement outlining the bad faith clauses and the existence of corroborated evidence of a coordinated fraud. The court of public opinion turned against them almost instantly. Isabella's world collapsed with the quiet finality of a signed document. She signed the divorce papers. She received nothing. The lump sum was zero. The marital assets she was entitled to were the jewelry I had given her, which she had to return, as per the prenup's asset schedule, and her personal belongings. The gold-plated statue from our wedding? Seized and sold to cover a fraction of her owed legal fees. It fetched a pittance at auction. Marco's various business ventures collapsed without my capital to prop them up, and he was eventually indicted for fraud related to the gallery. Isabella, now legally tied to his schemes, faced her own legal battles and massive debt. The ex-boyfriend, having cooperated, was left alone. The last I heard, Isabella had moved back in with a distant relative in a different state, her name and reputation in ruins. The gold digger had dug herself into a hole so deep, she could never climb out. I did not immediately jump back into the dating world. I took time. I traveled, but for myself this time. I went to the places Sarah had always wanted to see. I reconnected with my friends, with my family. I found a new rhythm to my life, one that wasn't dictated by the need to fill a silence. I established a charitable foundation in Sarah's name, focusing on supporting widows and widowers, something I now understood on a visceral level. I found a new purpose, a new peace. The poetic justice was absolute. The very weapon she had sought to destroy, the prenup, became the unbreachable fortress that protected me. Her own greed, her rush for the gold, had blinded her to the legal snares waiting in the long grass. She thought the prenup was a barrier to be broken. It was, in fact, the trapdoor beneath her feet. Now, standing on the terrace of that same vineyard, watching another sunset, I feel a quiet sense of closure. They say a prenuptial agreement is a plan for failure. I see it differently. It's a test of true intention. I learned that the hardest asset to protect isn't your money, it's your heart. But if you're smart, you can build a vault for that, too. And for those who try to pick the lock, let's just say the security system is far more sophisticated than they could ever imagine. What would you have done? Could a prenup have protected you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served, subscribe for more tales of karma and comeuppance.